Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Part 1. Robinson's Adventures at Sea.
I was born in the year 1632 in the city of York in England. My father was of a good family. He was a merchant from Bremen in Germany. He settled in England and made his fortune in trade. Then he married. My mother's family name was Robinson. I was baptized Robinson Kreutzner. However, in England we were always called Crusoe, so my friends call me Robinson Crusoe. I had two brothers. One became a soldier and was killed in a battle against the Spaniards. I do not know what happened to my other brother. My father hoped I would study law, but I wanted to go to sea. Although my mother and father did not want me to go, my desire was so strong that I ignored their wishes. My father was a wise and serious man. He said that if I stayed at home, my life would be easy and pleasant. Only desperate men or very fortunate men went abroad, he said. I was neither desperate nor very fortunate. Mine was the middle state, and he thought that the middle state was the best. The poor had a difficult life, and the rich were hated by the poor, said he. In the middle state a man could be happy. Kings often regretted that they were not born in the middle state, and wise men prayed to have neither poverty nor wealth. He said that the greatest misfortunes in life were suffered by the rich and the poor. Only the man in the middle state can live in peace. He said that moderation, quietness, and good health were the conditions of the middle state. He begged me not to abandon this happy condition. He told me that he had begged my brother not to become a soldier for the same reasons. However, my brother had run away to the army, and now he was dead. He said that God would not bless me if I went to sea, and that I would be sorry I had ignored my father's advice. During the last part of his discourse, the tears ran down his face, especially when he spoke of my brother. When he said that I would regret my choice, he was so moved that he could say no more. I was sincerely affected by his words, and decided not to think of going abroad any more. But, alas, in a few days I began to dream of the sea again. I spoke to my mother. I told her that I still desired to go to sea, and that nothing else would make me happy. I said that I was 18 years old, too old to begin another profession. I asked her to persuade my father to let me go to sea. This made her very angry. She said that it would be useless to speak to my father. If I wanted to ruin myself, she said, there was nothing she or my father could do to stop me. However, they would never agree to it. A year later, I ran off to sea. This is how it happened. One day I went to the port of Hull. A friend of mine was going by sea to London in his father's ship. He asked me to go with him. Since it would cost me nothing, I decided to go, without even telling my mother and father. Thus, on the 1st of September 1651, I went on board a ship for the first time. As soon as the ship was at sea, the wind began to blow. I felt very sick and frightened. I thought that God was punishing me for leaving my father's house. The storm grew worse, although it was not as bad as many I have seen since. It was not even as bad as the storm I saw just a few days later, but it frightened me then. I thought the sea would swallow us. I swore to God that if I lived, I would return to my father's house and never go to sea again. The next day the sea grew calm and the sun shone. I no longer felt sick or frightened. My friend said,
"Well, Bob, how do you feel? Were you afraid?"
"It was a terrible storm,"
said I.
"Do you call that a storm?"
said he.
"That was nothing. Let's drink some rum and forget about it."
We drank the rum, and I forgot my promise to God. A few days later, there was a really terrible storm. The waves were as high as mountains. I was very frightened. I felt sorry that I had forgotten my promise to God. The sailors began to cry out that the ship would founder. Fortunately, I did not know what the word founder meant. I saw the captain and some others praying to God. At last we were rescued by a boat from another ship. As we escaped, we saw our own ship go down. It was only then that I understood the word founder. When we reached the shore, the people were very kind to us. They gave us money to return to Hull or continue to London, as we pleased. If I had returned home, I would have been happy. My father, like the father in Christ's story of the prodigal son, would have welcomed me. But I was foolish, and I did not go home. The captain, who was my father's friend, said to me,
"Young man, you should never go to sea again."
"Why, sir?"
said I.
"Will you never go to sea again?"
"That is different,"
said the captain.
"The sea is my profession. It is my duty to go to sea. But you made this voyage to see if you liked it. God has shown you that the sea is not for you. Perhaps that is why my ship foundered. You are like Jonah of the Bible story. I am sorry I ever allowed you on my ship."
I went to London by land. How unwise young people are! They are not afraid to sin, but they are afraid to seem foolish. I signed up for a voyage to Africa. I should have signed up as a sailor. I could have learnt the sailor's profession. In time, I might even have become a captain. However, I always made the worst choice, and I chose to go to sea as a gentleman. Therefore, I had no duties on the ship, and I had no chance of learning to be a sailor. I met the captain of a ship that had been on the coast of Africa. He had made good profits from the voyage, and was eager to go again. He asked me to go with him as his companion. He said that I need not pay for the voyage. If I had any money, he said, he would show me how to make a profit in trade. I accepted the offer and became friends with the captain, who was a good and honest man. Following the captain's advice, I spent about £40 on things of little value. These I could trade for gold on the coast of Africa. The voyage was a great success for me. Indeed, it was my only successful voyage. My friend the captain taught me the skills of both a sailor and a merchant. I brought home 5 pounds 9 ounces of gold, which I sold in London for nearly £300. Soon after our return to England, my friend died. I decided to do the same voyage again, and signed up on the same ship with its new captain. As we approached the coast of Africa, we were pursued by a Turkish ship. After a short battle, the Turkish ship was victorious, and we were all taken as prisoners to the port of Salih. The captain of the Turkish ship made me his slave. I was horrified by this surprising change from merchant to miserable slave. I remembered my father's prophecy that I would be miserable, and I realized that it had indeed been fulfilled. After about 2 years of slavery, I saw my chance of escape. One day my master sent me out fishing with his brother Ismail and a black slave boy called Xuri. The fishing boat was full of food, guns, and fresh water. While we were fishing, I pushed Ismail into the sea. He cried for help. I pointed a gun at him and said,
I will not hurt you if you do as I say. You swim well enough to reach the shore. Go, swim to shore and leave us alone. If you do not, I will shoot you in the head, for I want my liberty.
Ismail swam away from the ship, and I turned to the slave boy.
Xuri,
said I,
if you will be faithful to me, I will make you a great man. If not, I will throw you into the sea too.
The boy smiled and promised to be faithful to me. We sailed along the coast of Africa close to the shore. Sometimes we heard lions and other wild beasts. We needed fresh water, but we were afraid to go ashore for fear of wild beasts and savages. Xuri said that he would go ashore to get water, and I should wait in the boat.
Why should you go, Xuri?
I asked.
Why should I not go, and you wait in the boat?
Xuri replied in words that made me love him ever after.
If wild men come, they will eat me, and you will escape.
Well, Xuri,
I said,
we will both go. If wild men come, we will kill them, and they will eat neither of us.
We went ashore and got fresh water. As we were returning to the boat, we saw a lion on the beach. I aimed my gun and shot. Xuri and I took the skin off the lion, for I thought it might be of some value. We sailed along the coast for 10 days. I hoped that we would meet a European trading ship and be saved, but we did not meet one. Sometimes we saw people on the shore. Their skin was black, and they were naked. Once I thought of going ashore to meet them, but Xuri advised against it. I made signs to them that we needed food. They brought meat and grain and left it on the beach for us. I made signs to thank them, but had nothing to give them in payment. However, we soon had the chance to do them a great service. Just as we reached our boat, a leopard came running down from the mountain towards the beach. I shot it dead. The negroes were amazed and terrified by the sound of my gun. When they saw that the leopard was dead, they approached him. They wished to eat the flesh of this animal. I made signs to tell them that they could have him, and they began cutting him up. They cut off his skin and gave it to me. Leaving my friendly Negroes, I sailed on for 11 days. As we approached Cape Verde, Xury cried out,
"Master, a ship!"
I saw that it was a Portuguese ship. I sailed towards it, and in 3 hours I reached it. The men on the ship asked who I was. When I told them my story, they were very kind. They took me on board their ship with all my property from the boat. I offered all my property to the captain to thank him for saving me, but he would not take it. He said they were sailing to Brazil. He said that my property would be returned to me when we arrived. He offered to buy my boat from me. He paid me 80 pieces of 8 for it. He also offered me 60 pieces of 8 for my boy Xury. I did not want to sell the poor boy's liberty, because he had helped me to escape from slavery. Then the captain offered to set Xury free in 10 years, if he became a Christian. Xury said he was willing to go with him, so I let the captain have him. About 22 days later, we landed in All Saints Bay in Brazil. I will never forget the captain's kindness. He bought a lot of my property from the boat. I left the ship with about 220 pieces of 8. In Brazil, I saw how well the sugar planters lived. They grew rich quickly. I decided to settle in Brazil and become a sugar planter. The first 2 years were difficult, but then my plantation grew prosperous. I was sorry that I had sold my boy Xury, for I needed help. I was not happy in my new life. This was the middle state of which my father had spoken. I often said to myself,
I could have done this at home, instead of coming 5,000 miles to do it among strangers and savages.
I thought I was like a man stranded alone upon an island. Never compare your situation to a worse one. God may place you in the worst situation, so that you long for your old life. I say God was just to leave me on an island where I really was alone. If I had been content to stay as I was, I would have been rich and happy. By leaving me on an island, God made me understand this. The captain of the Portuguese ship advised me to send for some money. I had left my money with a friend in London. My friend sent me the money in the form of English goods. When they arrived, I thought that my fortune was made. I sold the goods at a great profit for about £400. As soon as I got this money, I bought myself a Negro slave. After 4 years, I had learnt the language and made some friends among my fellow planters. I told them of the trade in Negro slaves on the African coast.
If a merchant takes knives, hatchets, and other things of little value,
I said,
he can easily trade them for gold and Negro slaves.
They listened very attentively, especially to the part about buying slaves. There were very few slaves in Brazil at the time, and they cost a lot of money. 3 planters came to me the next morning. They said they planned to buy a ship and sail to the African coast to buy slaves. They wanted to make one voyage only, then share the slaves among their plantations. They asked me if I would go on this voyage, and they promised that I would have a share of slaves without spending any money. I agreed to go. I went aboard the ship on the 1st of September, 1659, exactly 8 years after my first voyage from Hull. We sailed up the coast to Cape St. Augustino. Then we lost sight of land. 12 days later, a hurricane hit our ship. For 12 days the winds blew strongly. Every day I expected the sea to swallow us. On the 12th day, the weather was a little calmer. The ship was filling with water, so I advised the captain to sail for Barbados. As we sailed, another storm hit us. The wind blew us far away from the trading routes. If we came to land, we would probably be eaten by savages. One morning, a sailor cried out,
Land!
We ran out to look. But at that moment the ship struck sand. The waves broke over the ship, and we thought we would all die. We could not move the ship off the sand. We were sure that the ship would soon break into pieces. Therefore we climbed into a boat and left the ship. We rowed through that wild water towards the land, knowing that we were rowing towards our greatest danger. Then a great wave came, and the boat turned over. Though I was a good swimmer, I could not get my breath in this stormy sea. A wave carried me along towards the shore. It left me on the sand, half drowned. I stood up and walked fast towards the beach. I knew another wave would soon break over me. The sea rose behind me like a mountain. I held my breath, and the wave carried me closer to the shore. I tried to stand up and get my breath again, but another wave broke over me. I was carried with great force and speed towards the shore. Then my head shot above the water, and I was able to breathe for a moment. I was covered with water again. Then that wave too began to withdraw. I felt the earth under my feet. I ran towards the shore, but twice more the waves came over me. The last time nearly killed me. The sea threw me hard against a rock. I held on to the rock as the next wave broke over me. When the wave withdrew, I ran to the beach, climbed over the rocks, and lay down on the grass.
Part 2. Stranded on the Island.
I looked up and thanked God for saving my life. A short time before, there had seemed to be no hope. It is impossible to describe the joy of someone who has just escaped death. I alone had survived. All my companions were dead. When I saw how far away the ship was, I was amazed that I had been able to get to shore. I then began to look around me to see what kind of a place I was in. My joy left me. I was wet, I had no other clothes, and I had nothing to eat or drink. Surely I would die of starvation or be eaten by wild animals. I had no gun with which to hunt for food or defend myself. For a while I ran around, trembling and crying. Night came. I walked around looking for fresh water. When I found some, I drank. Then I climbed up a tree to sleep. When I awoke, the sun was shining. The waves had moved the ship closer to the shore during the night. I realized that if we had stayed on board, we would all have survived the storm. This thought made the tears run down my face. I took off my clothes and swam to the ship. I climbed aboard and looked around. The ship's store of food was not wet. I needed a boat or raft to carry the goods back to the shore. There were several large pieces of wood on the ship. I threw them into the sea, then jumped in myself, and tied them all together with rope. In this way, after a lot of time and effort, I made a raft. I then loaded the raft with food, clothes, tools, guns, and bullets, all packed in wooden boxes. I got onto the raft and returned to the shore. A short distance from where I had landed the night before, I saw a river. I landed the raft a little way up the river and got all my goods on shore. I did not yet know whether I was on the mainland or an island. I took a gun and climbed a hill. From the top of the hill I saw that I was on an island. I saw many birds, but no animals or people. On my way back down the hill, I shot a bird. I believe it was the first gun fired there since the creation of the world. At the sound, thousands of birds rose screaming into the air. That evening I set wooden boards and boxes around me to protect me as I slept. The next day I returned to the ship. This time I got a hammock, blankets, hatchets, a perspective glass, and sails. Back on shore I made a tent out of one of the sails. I brought everything into the tent that could be ruined by rain or sun. Then I made a bed and slept in it quietly all night, for I was very tired from the work of the day. I had the largest store, I believe, that was ever laid up for one man. However, I was not satisfied. The ship had not yet broken to pieces, and I thought I should get everything I could out of her. Every day I went to the ship and brought back more goods. I brought bread, rum, sugar, and many other things back to my tent. Finally, there was nothing more to take out of the ship. I then began to take pieces of the ship itself, iron, nails, rope. I carried away everything I could. I had now been on the island for 13 days, and had been 11 times on board the ship. I think that if the weather had remained calm, I would have brought the whole ship away, piece by piece. The last time I went to the ship, I found money. I smiled and said,
"Oh, drug, what are you good for? One knife is worth more to me than all this money. I will leave you here. You are a creature whose life is not worth saving."
However, on second thoughts, I took it away. Then clouds covered the sky and the wind began to blow. I went home to my tent, where I lay with all my wealth around me very secure. There was a bad storm that night. In the morning the ship was gone. I now began to think about protecting myself from savages and wild animals. I wanted to build my house in a place that was near a fresh water supply. It should be sheltered from the sun. It should be safe from attack. Finally, it should face the sea, so that I could see any ship that came near the island. I still hoped to be rescued. I found a little flat shelf on the side of a hill. There was a cliff behind it, so that nothing could attack me from behind. In front, the hill descended to the beach. It was on the north side of the hill, so that it was sheltered from the sun all day. I built my tent against the cliff. Then I built a high, strong wooden fence in a semicircle around the front of my tent. I made a ladder. When I was inside, I could bring the ladder in after me. In this way, neither man nor beast could enter my house. It took a lot of time and effort to carry all my goods inside. Then I began to dig out a cave in the cliff behind my tent, because I needed a place to store my property. After a big storm, I was afraid that lightning might strike my great box of gunpowder. Therefore I made many small boxes and put the gunpowder in them. These I hid in places secure from lightning. Every day I went out hunting. There were goats on the island. I shot a she-goat that had a little kid by her. This made me very sad. When I carried the dead she-goat to my house, the kid followed me, but it would not eat. I was therefore forced to kill it and eat it. I thought about my situation a lot. The storm had blown the ship hundreds of miles away from the European trading routes. Therefore I thought it was God's will that I should spend the rest of my life on this miserable island. I often ask myself why God chose to ruin his creatures. It seemed hardly rational to be thankful for such a life. Then one day, when I was walking on the beach with my gun, I thought,
Certainly you are miserable. But what happened to the others? You alone were fortunate enough to survive. Is it better to be on this island or at the bottom of the sea?
Then I thought how well equipped I was to survive on the island. What would have happened to me if the ship had not been blown closer to shore? That happy chance allowed me to take all these things from the ship. How would I have lived without guns and bullets, tools and clothes? I was afraid that I would forget what day it was. I might even forget the Sabbath. Therefore I planted a great wooden cross on the beach, and on it I carved these words with my knife.
I came on shore here on the 30th of September, 1659.
Upon the sides of the post I made a small cut with my knife every day, a longer cut every Sunday, and an even longer cut for the first day of every month. I forgot to say before that among the things I took from the ship were some Catholic prayer books and 3 Bibles. There were also 2 cats and a dog on board the ship. I carried the cats back with me to the island. The dog jumped into the sea and swam after me. I tried to comfort myself by listing the comforts I enjoyed beside the miseries I suffered, like this.
Evil. I am stranded on an island with no hope of being saved. I have been singled out. I alone am chosen to lead this miserable life. I am separated from mankind, without human society. I have not clothes to cover me. I have no means of defending myself against attack by man or beast. I have no soul to speak to. Good, but I am alive, not drowned as were the other men on the ship. But I have also been singled out to survive, and he who saved me can deliver me from this condition. But I am not starving. There is food on the island, but the weather is hot, and I do not need clothes. But I see no wild beasts on this island. What if I had been shipwrecked on the coast of Africa, where I saw the lion and the leopard? But God sent the ship near enough to the shore that I have been able to supply myself with many things.
This showed me clearly that even in the most miserable conditions there are things for which to be thankful. Robinson Crusoe's Journal. September the 30th, 1659. I, poor miserable Robinson Crusoe, was shipwrecked near the shore of this unfortunate island, which I call the Island of Despair. October the 1st to October the 24th. I spent my time getting all I could out of the ship. It often rained during these days, this being the rainy season. October the 25th. It rained all day and night. The bad weather broke the ship into pieces. I spent this day hiding my goods from the rain. October the 26th to October the 30th. I found a place in which to build my house, and worked very hard, carrying all my property to this place. October the 31st, I went out with my gun to find food. I shot a she-goat. November the 1st, I set up my tent and my hammock. November the 2nd, I set wooden boxes and boards to form a fence around my tent. November the 3rd, I went out with my gun and killed 2 birds, which were very good food. In the afternoon, I began to make myself a table. November the 4th, this morning I began to plan my time. Every morning after this I walked out with my gun for 2 or 3 hours if it did not rain. I worked until about 11 o'clock. Then I ate. From 12 to 2, when it was very hot, I slept. In the evening I worked again. November the 5th. This day I went out with my gun and my dog. I killed a wild cat. Her skin was soft, but I could not eat the meat. I skinned every creature that I killed, and kept the skin. November the 6th. I finished my table, but was not satisfied with it. November the 7th. Now the weather began to be pleasant. From the 7th to the 12th, I worked at making myself a chair, except for the 11th, which was a Sunday. I was not satisfied with the chair. Note, I soon forgot which days were Sundays, having forgotten to make the longer cut on the post. November the 13th. This day it rained, which cooled the earth and refreshed me. There was terrible thunder and lightning. I decided to separate my powder into many small boxes and to store them far from each other. November the 14th, 15th, and 16th, I spent these 3 days making little boxes for my powder. On one of these days, I killed a large bird that was good to eat, but I do not know its name. November the 17th. This day I began to dig in the rock behind my tent to make a cave in which to store my goods. Note, I needed 2 things for this work, a pickaxe and a shovel. I stopped my work to make these tools. I made a pickaxe out of the pieces of iron I had taken from the ship, but I had no idea how to make a shovel. November the 18th. In the woods I found an iron tree, so called because its wood is very hard. With great difficulty I cut a piece of this wood, carried it home, and carved it into the form of a shovel. The making of these tools took me 4 days. November the 23rd. I began work on the cave again, and worked for 18 days. At the end of that time, the cave was large enough to hold all my goods. December the 10th. Just when I had finished my cave, The roof fell in. This frightened me. If I had been inside at the time, I would have been killed. I carried out all the fallen earth and built props to hold up the roof so that it would not fall down again. December the 17th. From this day to the 27th, I built shelves. December the 20th. I carried all my property into the cave and put everything in order. December the 24th. It rained all day and night, so that I could not go out. December the 25th. Rain all day. December the 26th. No rain. The earth was much cooler than before. December the 27th. I killed a young goat and shot another in the leg. I led the wounded goat home and took care of it. It lived and grew tame. It ate the grass around my house and would not go away. This gave me the idea of breeding the goats, so that they would grow up tame and provide me with food when my gunpowder was finished. January the 3rd to April the 14th. I built a fence around my house. I cut branches from trees and planted them deep in the ground. After a while they began to grow, so that my fence looked like a natural thing.
Part 3. Lord of the Island.
One day I found among my goods a little bag that had once held grain on board our ship. I decided to use it to store my powder, so I shook it out near the rock outside my house. Soon afterwards the rains came. A month later I saw some young plants growing there. I had forgotten all about the grain bag. When the plants grew, I was surprised to see that some were our English barley, and others were rice. Up to this point I had very little idea of religion. I thought of everything that had happened to me as chance. When I saw English barley growing there, I thought it was a miracle. God had made it grow there to comfort me. This thought brought tears to my eyes. Then I remembered shaking out the bag in that place just before the rains came. This calmed my mind. I thought the grain had grown there by chance, and so I felt less thankful to God. But I should have been thankful anyway, because the chance of grain growing there was very small. By chance 10 or 12 grains of barley and rice had remained in the bottom of the bag. By chance I had shaken out the bag in the shade of the rock, where it was protected from the sun. I carefully saved the grain to plant again, hoping to grow enough to supply me with bread. April the 16th. I finished my ladder. With this I could climb over the fence. The fence was now thick and high. From outside the house could not be seen. At last I was safe from attack by man or beast. The next day the earth came falling down from the roof of my cave and the hill above it. I thought that my cave was falling in, as it had done before. I climbed the fence for fear of being buried alive. Once outside, I realized that it was an earthquake. I was terrified that the hill would fall upon my tent and bury all my goods. I sat on the ground feeling miserable. The wind rose and there was a great storm. It lasted about 3 hours. At that time I sat on the ground, terrified and miserable, but I never had one serious religious thought. 2 hours later the air and sea were calm, and it began to rain. I realized that the storm had been the result of the earthquake, and that the earthquake was now over. I went in and sat in my tent. June the 16th. On the beach at the other side of the island, I found a large turtle. I had never seen one before, but I soon discovered that there were many on the other side of the island. June the 19th. I fell ill and began shivering. June the 20th. I did not sleep all night because of the fever. June the 21st. I was terrified by my illness and had no one to help me. I prayed to God for the first time since the storm on the sea by Hull. I could not think clearly. For several days I lay shivering with fever. June the 26th. I woke up feeling better. Having no food, I took my gun and killed a goat. I found it very difficult to carry the goat home because I was weak from my illness. June the 27th. I fell ill again and lay in bed all day without food or drink. I tried to pray to God, but all I could say was,
Lord, have mercy upon me.
Over and over again. I fell asleep and had a terrible dream. I dreamt I was sitting on the ground outside my house. I saw a man descend from the sky. He was clothed in fire and held a spear in his hand. When he landed on the ground before me, the earth trembled. He moved towards me to kill me. Then he said,
Since you do not repent, now you will die.
I awoke terrified. Alas, I had no religious knowledge. What my father had taught me had all been forgotten in 8 years of a wicked sailor's life. My soul had been stupid. It had not desired good. It had not feared evil. Through all my misfortunes, I had never once thought that they were the just punishment for my sins. I had acted like an animal, guided by my passions. When the rice and barley grew, I had a moment of serious religious thought. But that passed when I discovered that it was not a miracle. Now, for the first time, I began seriously to repent of my sinful life. I saw my condition not as simple misfortune, but as the punishment of a just God. These thoughts brought tears to my eyes. I remembered my father's words. He had said that if I went to sea, God would not bless me, and I would be sorry.
Now,
I said to myself,
my father's prophecy has really been fulfilled. God has punished me, and there is no one to help me.
Then I cried out,
Lord, help me, for I am in great distress.
June the 28th. Feeling a little stronger, I ate some turtle meat. This was the first time in my life I asked God's blessing on what I ate. Afterwards I took my gun and walked to the shore. There I sat down, feeling weak once more, and looked out at the sea.
What,
I asked myself,
is this earth and sea of which I have seen so much? What am I? What are men and beasts? Where do we come from? Surely we are made by the same secret power that formed the earth and sea. Who is that?
The answer was clear.
God made it all.
Then I thought,
if God made all these things, he must also guide them all. Nothing can happen in creation without his knowledge. Therefore, he knows that I am here in this miserable condition, and he meant these things to happen to me. Why has God done this to me?
I asked myself. But then I remembered my wicked life, and I said to myself,
Why do you ask why God has done this to you? Ask instead why you were not killed long ago.
Sadly disturbed by these thoughts, I went to my chest to look for some tobacco. There I also found the Bibles I had taken from the ship. I took one of the Bibles and began to read. The first words I saw were these:
Call on me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you, and you will praise me.
The words were very relevant to my situation, and I often thought about them afterwards. Before going to bed, I knelt down and prayed to God. I asked him to fulfill the promise of the Bible and deliver me. I had taken rum and tobacco, so I fell asleep, and did not wake up until about 3 in the afternoon of the next day. When I awoke, I was refreshed and cheerful. July the 3rd. I thought often about the words in the Bible, will deliver you. But it seemed impossible that I should escape from the island. Then suddenly I said to myself,
But I have been delivered from my illness.
God had delivered me, but I had not praised him. Instead of thanking him for saving my life, I had thought only of escaping from the island. July the 4th. I began to read the Bible seriously. I decided to read a little every morning and every night. Now I understood the words, "Call on me, and I will deliver you," in a different way. Before I had asked to be delivered from my island prison. Now I asked to be delivered from the guilt of my sinful past. Deliverance from sin is a far greater blessing than deliverance from misery. My mind was now calm and comforted. I had been on this unhappy island for more than 10 months. I believed that no human being had ever come here before. I was lord of the whole island. If I liked, I could call myself king or emperor. I had enough wood to build 20 ships, enough food for an army. However, if I could not use it, it was of no value to me. I had enough to eat, so the rest was useless. I would have gladly given all my money for a little ink, because it would have been useful. My life was now much easier than before. I thought much more about the blessings of my present life and much less about its misfortunes. My ink had been gone for some time. My clothes were all worn out. I made new clothes for myself from the skins of the goats I killed. This was very slow and difficult work, since I had no needle. The weather was so hot that I could have gone naked. However, I did not want to go naked, even though there was no one to see me. I could not go naked because the sun was so strong that it would burn my skin. I therefore made myself clothes, a hat, and even an umbrella. I tried to make a boat or canoe with which to escape from the island, for on a clear day I could see the mainland. It took me a long time to build the canoe. When it was finished, it was too big for me to move. I could not get it to the shore, and so I left it where I had built it. Later I made a smaller boat, but this was not large enough to take me to the mainland. I used it to sail around my island. My life continued in this way for many years. It was an orderly life, filled with work and the praise of God. I was not unhappy. I was king of my island. My subjects were the goats, the dog, the cats, and some parrots I had tamed. There were no rebels among my subjects. One day, around noon, something happened that changed my life on the island. I found the print of a man's naked foot on the beach. I stood and looked at the footprint in amazement. I looked around me, but saw nothing. I went to higher ground and looked again, but it was the same. I saw no one, and no other footprint except that one. I was terrified, and went home to hide myself. At first I thought it must have been the footprint of the devil, for how could a human being have come to this place? I then began to think the print was left by savages from the mainland. They must have come in canoes and left again. I was very thankful that they had not seen my boat. How strange is the life of man! Today we desire what tomorrow we fear. For years I had desired human society. Now I was terrified at the thought that another human being had set his foot upon the island. I thought again of the words in the Bible, "Call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you, and you will praise me." I prayed to God to deliver me from danger. Afterwards, I opened my Bible and read,
"Wait on the Lord, and be of good cheer, and he shall strengthen your heart."
Although these words comforted me, I was still afraid. Fear of danger is 10,000 times more terrifying than danger itself. I no longer trusted in God as I had before. If I had kept my trust in God, I would have been more cheerful in this new distress.
Part 4. Footprints in the Sand.
I had now been living on the island for 15 years. During all that time I had never seen another human being. However, savages from the mainland had clearly come to the island, and they might come again. I decided to build a second fence around my house and plant trees outside it, so that no one could enter. In 6 years, I had a thick wood around my house. About 2 years after I saw the footprint, I thought I saw a boat in the distance, off the western part of the island. Perhaps the savages from the mainland often came to that side of the island. Perhaps God had guided me to the eastern side, where the savages never came. When I came down the hill to the shore, I was amazed and horrified to see human skulls, hands and feet lying on the sand. There was a pit in the earth where a fire had been made. There the savages had made their inhuman feast, eating the bodies of their fellow men. I turned away from this terrible sight. I felt sick and vomited. Then I ran back to my house. My eyes were full of tears. I thanked God that I had been born a civilized man, quite different from these savages. I thanked him for the comforts he had sent me in my distress. I thought I was probably safe from the savages. I had been on the island for 18 years, and I had never met them. I could live there safely 18 more years if I did not choose to show myself to them. For 2 years after this, I stayed close to my house. Then I began to go about the island as before, but more cautiously. I did not fire my gun, for fear that the savages should hear the shot. Fortunately, I had my tame goats, and could kill them for meat without using my gun. I began to think night and day of killing some of these savages. Perhaps I could rescue their victim. I was horrified by their inhuman feasting. I was full of anger towards them. Sometimes I thought of burying 5 or 6 pounds of gunpowder under the place where they made their fire. When they lit the fire, the gunpowder would explode and kill them. But I did not want to use so much gunpowder, since I had very little left. Then I thought of waiting for them, hidden from sight with my guns loaded. In the middle of their bloody feast, I would shoot at them, and I would be sure to kill many. Then I would run at them with my pistols and sword. Even if there were 20 of them, I was sure I could kill them all. This idea pleased me very much. I thought about it so much that I began to dream about it. Every day for 2 or 3 months, I walked to the western side of the island and looked out to sea. All this time I was willing and eager to do an outrageous act. I was ready to kill 20 or 30 naked savages. I had not given any thought to this sin. I had never asked myself if it were right or wrong. I was fired by my hatred of their unnatural customs. When I tired of watching out for them every day, I began to question my plan. God had let them live unpunished for ages, and what had these people ever done to me? They did not think it was a sin to kill a prisoner and eat his flesh. Then I thought that, though this custom was inhuman, it was really nothing to me. These people had done me no harm. If they attacked me, then I might have the right to kill them. At present, I was at no risk, and therefore I had no right to kill them. If I did so, I would be no better than the Spaniards who had destroyed millions of savages in America. The savages had done the Spaniards no harm. All the Christian nations of Europe said that the Spaniards had been cruel and unnatural to kill those people. These thoughts made me abandon my bloody plan. Besides, I thought that attacking them would put me at greater risk. If I did not kill all of them, the survivors would go home and return with others to kill me. Therefore, I decided it was neither just nor wise to attack the savages. I gave thanks to God that I had been saved from committing a great sin. For a year afterwards, I never went to the western shore, except once, to get my boat and hide it on the eastern side of the island. I had now been living on the island for 23 years, and I had found some pleasant ways to pass the time. I taught my parrot to speak. I taught him to say,
"Poor Robinson Crusoe!"
He lived with me for 26 years. Perhaps he is still living on the island, calling out,
"Poor Robinson Crusoe!"
I might have lived this way until I died, contented in old age. But God had other plans for me. How often in our lives the thing we fear most becomes the means of our deliverance. I could give many examples of this in my strange life. However, the best example is that of my last years on the island. It was December of my 23rd year. I went out early one morning when it was still dark. Suddenly I saw a fire on the shore about 2 miles away. I went back to my house and pulled the ladder up after me. I loaded all my guns and prayed to God to protect me. After about 2 hours, I wanted to know what was happening outside. I climbed the hill behind my house, lay down in the grass, and looked towards the shore with my perspective glass. There I saw 9 naked savages sitting around a small fire. They had 2 canoes with them. Some hours later they got into their canoes and left the island. As soon as they were gone, I took my guns and went to the western shore. I saw that there had been 3 more canoes at that place. Looking out to sea, I saw them all rowing back to the mainland. Going down to the shore, I saw the remains of their unnatural feast. The blood, the bones, the parts of human bodies. I was so filled with anger at this sight that I began again to think about destroying the next savages who came there. It was more than 15 months before they returned to the island. During all this time, I was in a murderous state of mind. I did not think that if I killed these savages, I would have to also kill the next ones who came, and the next, and the next. In the end, I would be as much a murderer as they were, and perhaps much more so. On the 16th of May, in my 24th year on the island, there was a terrible storm. I was reading the Bible and thinking about my condition. Suddenly I heard the sound of a gun out at sea. I left my house and ran up to the top of the hill. There I saw a flash of fire on the sea, and heard the sound of the gun again.
It must be a ship in distress,
I thought.
firing her guns to call for help.
I could not help them, but I thought that they might help me. Therefore I built a fire on the hilltop. I was sure that the people on the ship had seen my fire, because as soon as I lit it, they fired the gun again. The next morning, I saw that the ship was wrecked. Perhaps the people on board were all dead, or perhaps they had escaped in a boat and been blown away from the island towards the open sea. If so, they would die of starvation. Even now they might be thinking of eating one another. I was thankful that God had chosen to save me alone out of all those who had been drowned in this sea. But I was also sad, so that I cried out,
Oh, if one person had been saved out of that ship and had escaped to this island, I would have had a companion, someone to talk to.
In all my time on the island, I never had so strong a desire for human society. I was in great distress.
Oh, if just one had been saved.
I cried over and over again, but it was not to be. A few days later, I saw the body of a drowned boy come on shore, which made me very sad. I took my boat and went out to the wreck. There I found no living soul, but I brought back more goods, about 1,100 pieces of eight and some gold. I stored these goods in a cave on the island. For the next 2 years I lived quietly and cautiously on the island. Yet all that time I was imagining ways to escape. Thus, once again, I was an example of the common weakness of mankind. We are never satisfied with what God has given us, and this makes us miserable. One night I dreamt I was going out in the morning from my house. Upon the shore I saw 2 canoes and 11 savages coming to land. They had with them another savage, and they were going to kill and eat him. Suddenly their prisoner began to run as fast as he could. He ran to the thick woods in front of my house to hide himself. Seeing that he was alone, I showed myself to him. He knelt down before me and begged me to help him. I showed him the ladder and took him into my house. He became my servant. Then I thought I could go to the mainland with this man to guide me. I awoke full of joy, but when I found it was only a dream, I felt very sad. This dream gave me the idea that my only hope of escape was to get a savage. If possible, I would rescue one of those they brought over to eat. This could only be done by killing all the other savages, and my heart trembled at the thought. However, my desire to escape was so strong that finally I decided to watch out for the savages again. For about a year and a half I watched. No one came to the island in all that time. Then one morning I saw 5 canoes on the shore. I climbed the hill, hid myself in the grass, and watched them with my perspective glass. There were about 30 of them. They had built a fire and were dancing around it. As I watched, they brought 2 prisoners from the boats to be killed. One of the prisoners fell down, and the savages began cutting him up for their feast. At that moment, the other prisoner began to run. He ran with amazing speed along the shore towards my house. I was terribly frightened when I saw him running towards me. I thought that all the others would follow him. My dream seemed to be coming true. When I saw that only 3 men were pursuing him, I felt less frightened. The prisoner came to the river, jumped in, and swam across. When his pursuers came to the river, one of them stopped and turned back, for clearly he could not swim. The others swam across the river, but not so quickly as the prisoner had done. I thought that God was calling me to save this poor creature's life. I thought that by saving his life I would get a servant and perhaps a companion. I took my guns and ran down to the shore. I cried out to the prisoner. At first he was frightened of me. Slowly I walked towards the 2 who followed. I hit the first one with my gun. Having knocked this fellow down, I walked towards the other. I saw that he had a spear. He was ready to throw it at me. Therefore I had no choice but to shoot him. Though he saw that both his enemies had fallen, the poor savage was frightened by the sound of my gun. I called to him and made encouraging signs. The poor creature was trembling. He walked towards me slowly. When he came close to me, he knelt on the ground and kissed the earth. He then put his head upon the ground. He took my foot and placed it upon his head. I helped him to his feet and encouraged him. The savage I had knocked down now began to move. I pointed to him to show my savage that his enemy was not dead. My savage spoke some words to me. I did not understand them, but I enjoyed listening to them. They were the first words spoken to me by any human being for over 25 years. I pointed my gun at the savage on the ground. My savage touched the sword at my side, as if asking to use it. I gave it to him, and he ran to his enemy and cut off his head with one blow. When he had done this, he came back to me, laughing, and gave me my sword. Then he buried the bodies in the sand. Afterwards I took my savage to my cave and gave him food and water. I made signs to him that he should sleep, and pointed to the blanket where I often slept myself. He was a strong, handsome fellow, about 26 years old. He had a pleasant face with all the sweetness and softness of a European, especially when he smiled. When he awoke, he made many signs of thankfulness to me for saving his life. I showed him that I was pleased with him. Then I began to speak to him and teach him how to speak to me. First I told him that his name would be Friday, which was the name of the day on which I saved his life. I taught him to call me Master. I stayed with him in the cave all that night. The next morning we went out. We came to the place where we had buried the two men. Friday made signs to me that we should dig them up and eat them. I made signs of vomiting and let him know how much I hated the idea. I then led him to the top of the hill to see if his enemies were still on the island. Savages and their canoes were gone. We went down to the place where they had been. I was horrified at the sight, but Friday did not seem disturbed by it. The place was covered with human bones and blood. I saw 3 skulls, 5 hands, and the bones of 3 or 4 legs and feet. I made Friday put the skulls and bones into a pile and burn them. I could see that he still wished to eat some of the flesh. When we had done this, we went back to our house. I made clothes for Friday. Then I built a tent for him between the first fence and the second. Thus Friday could not attack me during the night. But there was no need. Friday was the most faithful, loving, and sincere servant. He loved me as a child loves his father. He would have given his life to save mine. God did not give all his creatures the knowledge of how best to use their capacities. However, he gave all mankind the same reason, sentiments, and passions. It made me sad to think that God had hidden the saving knowledge from so many millions of souls. Someone like Friday would use that knowledge better than many white men,